All right. Welcome to GTV, place where I'm going to help you learn how to eat like you mean it, drink like you mean it. Today's topic is what is soul food? Now, I know I'm new to this YouTube thing, so bear with me as I work out all the kinks and that sort of thing. Um, we're going to get to what soul food is in just a second, but I wanted to kind of set this up in a way that you can kind of understand. There was a time back in the day where people would talk about neo soul, and I had a professor of mine. Shout out to Georgia State University's African American Studies Department, just setting up the little grenades here and there for all of us to go boom. Um, Neo soul doesn't exist because soul is the transmission from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next. It is a riff like you would find in jazz. It is very much in kind of a thing that you have. So to say that, when you start talking about soul food, we're talking about anything can be soul food. If you're Italian and your noni has taught you how to make a lasagna or taught you how to make this certain dish, and it is being translated from her to your mother to you, and it came back from back from her time in North Italy or in Sicily or wherever, that's soul food. If you're making Chinese noodles and you're Chinese and you're trying to make your grandmother's recipe for whatever dish that might be, that's soul food. You're transmitting what happened then to what's going on now, and hopefully to pass it on to what comes after you. That's what soul food is. So to say soul food, and the moment that you close your eyes and I say what is soul food, and the first thing you think of is collard greens, black eyed peas, macaroni and cheese. Don't understand that part. I love me some macaroni and cheese. It's not soul food. You're literally talking about somebody's transmission from the past to the present to the future. That's what soul food is. Now, when we start talking about Southern cooking, and you want to talk about this in any way, shape, form, or fashion that you want to, i.e. Caribbean cooking, Creole cooking. Notice I didn't say Cajun, I said Creole. There's a difference. We'll talk about that in a second. We are now talking about soul food in that idea: fried chicken, collard greens, black eyed peas. Yeah, soul food. Get it in your body. That's not soul food. We need to call it what it is. That is, pay attention to what I'm saying, Afro-diasporic cooking. In other words, any place that Africans were dispersed to, they have fundamentally changed the culinary landscape every time that they landed. They have brought something from home because they were innovative and smart and intelligent. And even though the story of roots of us being stacked like planks, chained to one another, peeing and crapping on one another for 3 months as we traveled from Africa over to the islands, the fact of the matter is that what happened there was not actually the story, because we have foodstuffs that exist here in America that don't exist, shouldn't exist anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. Now, you can subscribe to the they came before Columbus and certain things showed up. Okay, fact of the matter is that South Carolina gold rice, which that's a white guy making a crap ton of money off of rice that is directly from Ghana, that was not transported as a food, and we're like, this is really good rice. Right. The Gullah and the Geechee communities had already had their rice production going. So you're left with this idea: how did this food get here? Field peas, cowpeas, If you couldn't get cow peas or field peas, you used black-eyed peas. This is a translation. We'll talk about that in a second. This is a translation from, we couldn't find it, so we're using it in this way. Same thing with sweet potatoes and yams, which we call yams. They're not yams. They're sweet potatoes. Whole different beast. But as you're talking about it, soul food as a concept, and especially when you're talking about Southern American cooking or Creole cooking or Carib cooking, or these are all Afro-diasporic cooking. In other words, Africans dispersed from the continent brought their food, a little piece of home, because they couldn't go back. A little piece of home came with them. So they figured out how to make something that was comparable to what they would have had at home. Now, we can talk about the different ways that food, evolved on the continent, because there was a huge mashup between the Europeans and the Portuguese, bringing in stuff like tomatoes or bringing in stuff like, different foodstuffs from everywhere. And then all of a sudden, it becomes African food. We can talk about that later. What we're talking about here is when it got to Southern United States, when it got to Carib land, and, these slaves met these Indian slaves, because the British had brought Indians all the way over, helped them build railroads and whatever else. So you have curries coming out of nowhere. You've got roti coming out of nowhere. Things that you wouldn't normally see in African cooking now all of a sudden become a staple for Caribbean cooking. And then you take that a little bit further. You go over to New Orleans, and you have the Creole mixing in with the Spanish, mixing in with the Indian, mixing in with majority African food. You can't tell me that Creole cooking is not African cooking. I mean, if you have sauce pois done by a Haitian, and then you go and have beans and rice done by, somebody in New Orleans, you can say what you want. They're going to taste a lot alike. That's all I'm going to say. Now, going on from that, as we're talking about this, Southern cooking as Afro-diasporic cooking. This is going to be the term that you're going to need to learn for 2018. And I'm telling you now, I'm ahead of the curve on this one. Afro-diasporic cooking. All right? There's a lot of chefs out there right now that are doing great work on this very concept. Afro-diasporic cooking. In other words, we're taking what you would call soul food, which I don't want to use that word anymore because that's not what it is. I want to use Afro-diasporic cooking because it's going to be a direct contrast to what they are now calling New Southern cuisine. New Southern cuisine is basically what soul food, for lack of a better term, is. New Southern cuisine is taking the long growing season that you have in the South, utilizing all of these fresh vegetables, fresh herbs, game meats, heritage breeds, heirloom tomatoes. Everybody had their own, those. You've seen the country, the country fairs, the county fairs, where I had the best, the biggest pumpkin or the biggest squash or whatever else. That's basically what that is. You're using your knowledge of the plant, your knowledge of that seed, and you're trying to create the biggest and best produce out of that. The same thing goes with, with hunting and growing pigs and whatever else. It's all of the same thing, is that you have this idea where you're trying to grow the best of whatever else. I mix a little bit of Choctaw red pig with this Iberico, and I just made this, I made this hog that's 400 more pounds than any other hog that's been out there, which is a thing because feral hogs are taking over the South. Everybody get your gun and start to eat pork again. I digress. When you start talking about Southern cooking, you should be looking at the fact that it was less meat, more veg. It was a very plant-based food, a very plant-based meal plan, because you didn't get to eat meat all the time. Hence the reason why Sunday bird was fried chicken, because you got to eat the chicken then. You have to go back to when we were slaughtering stuff, and you would have a whole hog that would feed a family all winter long. And in the spring, lambs would come out, and the sheep and the goats, and you would eat that sparingly. It would be mixed into things, and that you would eat for a week. You would have a pot of greens. A pot of greens was always on the stove. That was my grandma thing, and she was from Detroit. There was always a pot of greens. There was always beans. There was always rice. And you have to start thinking about this when you start talking about soul food, Southern cooking, because the majority of us came from the South. But even those of us that didn't still ate beans, rice, vegetables for the majority of the time, because that's what we knew. So even if you were a freedman in the North, you were still eating beans, rice, vegetables, because that's how you got your protein, you got your nutrients, and you got your starch. Sound familiar? Let's talk about other things like barbecue. Now, there's plenty of stories on how barbecue came about and that sort of thing. But you start talking whole hog pit barbecue, started in South Carolina, North Carolina, basically those ideas. Well, let's look at how this came about. You start doing the pit. Young men dig the pit, get the coals started, get the fire going, boom. Put the burlap wrap, put the hog in the ground, cover that hog up, put coals on top. Young men go off to work. Old men tend to the fire. Day's over, however that worked out. Sun come up till sun come down. You come home, pig is done. Whole group of people, I would call them a village, but since we're talking slavery, it was a plantation, so it really wasn't a village. They would come. The women would bring the sides. The young men would help dig the pig out. Now, doesn't this sound like every family reunion barbecue, every barbecue you've ever been to? Old man on the grill, right? He tending to the grill. He telling the youngsters how they supposed to run the grill. We've all seen this happen. The women inside creating the sides, making potato salad or greens or whatever else. They're doing that while the men are by the fire tending to the meat. Sounds like every barbecue that you've ever been to. Who on the grill? Oh, that boy don't know nothing. I don't even know why he over there. He don't know how to grill. This is an Africanism. This is something that has gone all the way back to Africa. This is what we need to understand, and we need to realize that what we are doing is not just a product of us being here. It is a product of us being African and it being passed down piece by piece, generation by generation, to the youngsters, to the person that's coming up after us. This is how we have existed and survived for so long, because we are still carrying a piece of Africa with us with every generation. Now, it gets watered down, it gets changed, it gets transmuted, transmogrified, if you want to use big words. But the fact of the matter is that it is still a very African concept from its onset. So let's not call it soul food anymore. Afro-diasporic cooking. Now, when you are talking about this, I want you to remember that we didn't always eat meat all the time. There was no such thing as an Atkins diet. 90% of the world doesn't believe in Atkins diet. They eat rice and vegetables with every meal. Meat is a luxury. 90% of the world. So, yeah, go ahead. Eat meat with, put ham hocks in your greens and your black eyed peas and your, and then have a fried pork chop along with that, or some fried chicken or whatever else. That's why we have such a high rate of diabetes and heart issues and gout and whatever else you want to talk about. We've changed, or we've allowed what we consider to be food to be changed and dictated, just like rap, just like jazz, just like blues. We've allowed somebody else to dictate what is ours. Now, to that point, we need to change. I'm coming straight at you, coming with the real. We need to control our own. It's our food. Why are these white guys over here that have new Southern cuisine controlling the food they cook it, unless some slave back in the day showed them how to cook it, and then they passed it on? Now they're making millions of dollars with their beautiful restaurants. They're making millions of dollars with their beautiful food halls and this, that, and the other, while the mom and pop stores that you go to, the beautiful in Atlanta, Georgia, hole in the wall. It ain't nice. Good food. It ain't nice. Ain't no white tablecloths going on there. We need to control our own. We need to make and innovate our own cuisine so that it is palatable. And we need to control it. We need to control it so far as going back to that black farmer who most likely is doing organic, biodynamic, sustainable farming practices, because that's the way his grandpa taught him, and his grandpa before him, and his grandpa before him. That's the way that they cook. That's the way that they grew food. Now, a lot of them can't afford to get that tag that says USDA organic. Doesn't mean that they're not being organic. They can't afford the pesticides or the Monsanto seeds or whatever else. We need to connect with them so that we get them to start looking at growing heritage breeds of pigs and cows and goats and what have you. We need them to start making heirloom tomatoes and greens and cauliflower. Who knew cauliflower was multicolored? Bet you most of y'all didn't. I mean, most of y'all so confused, y'all think vanilla is white. Vanilla bean is as black as my sweatshirt. How about that? I know I'm starting to sound like an old man, but it is what it is. The restaurants that we are dealing with, your TGI McFuddy factories, are about the business of the bottom line. They are not in it for you. They don't care whether or not you come or you don't come. You go there thinking that you are making some sort of, you Big Willie, you balling out. Really? No. It's not the food that you actually want. Trust me, I worked in there. I've heard all of, can you not put that, put this, put that, put this in? That's going to be a whole nother piece. The social contract of what happens when black folk go into a restaurant and how we break that contract on many, many of occasions. What we need to understand is that those restaurants are about the bottom line. Business of the bottom line versus business of pleasure. If you go to an actual high-end restaurant, it's about the business of pleasure. Every bite is supposed to be exciting. Every piece, every morsel of food that goes into your body is supposed to be about it. It is supposed to be exciting to you. You're going to want it. You want to taste it. You want to taste more of it, but there's only so much. We're not trying to give you massive amounts of anything because we're not trying to fool you. We want you to have just enough to enjoy the experience. That's where it comes different than anything else. You go to one of these other places, they're trying to give you as much food as they possibly can, but it's all crap. You might as well have gone to McDonald's and went for the dollar menu. You mean 18 cheeseburgers at $18. There you go. It's the same thing. You think you can't eat it? I've seen you go to Crystal's and White Castle. We all done it. Go to Taco Bell. 30% of our meat is actual meat. The hell happened to the other 70%? This is what we're dealing with right now. So, what you need to understand is that there's a difference between the business of the bottom line and the business of pleasure. And what we need to start doing is controlling our food so that it is, one, combating dis-ease, sickness, whatever you want to call it. Two, we are controlling the factors that control the economy inside of our own community, because we're not doing that anymore. All of a sudden, we went from 2 generations ago, everybody had a garden in their backyard, to having to go to whole paycheck to try and find something that might even look green. I used to live in a part of Atlanta that every time we went to the grocery store, I could not find good produce. Now, there was an urban farmers market right down the road. But how many times did I get to go to that? See the problem? We're not marketing ourselves. We're not marketing that out there. We're not making it known. So what we need to do is we need to start creating food alliances with these people that are growing this. If you don't want to grow it, hey, you're busy. Got it. No problem. But you need to be able to go to a farmer's market, go to a place where they are growing their food and they're bringing it to you in a way that you can use it. You will see your food bills go down. If you are eating with more of a plant-based idea, you will see your food bills go down. You will be saving money. And I know that sounds strange I'm not putting vegetarianism or veganism on anybody. I love a steak. I love me some eggs. I love cheese. I love all these things. Not that it's good for me. I just say I love it. Not that I eat it all the time. Just saying that it's there. But what we need to do is start looking for these new ways to bring that food back. That southern food back. Back to the way your grandmother made stuff. Look, very simple. You go to your refrigerator and you open it up and there's nothing but processed, boxed, canned, well, not so much canned, but processed food that's got more than 8 ingredients on the back of the package, and it's got some sort of preservatives added in there, that's why you're sick. You don't have a gluten allergy. People have been eating bread for thousands of years. Matter of fact, baking bread is a hallmark of civilization. So don't tell me that you have a gluten allergy. You have a preservative allergy. You have a bleached white flour allergy, because there's tons of grains out there that you can make bread out of. Spelt, rye, sourdough, real sourdough, not that fake stuff that they call sourdough. Go to a real bakery. They will tell you the difference. Go to a real butcher. They will tell you the difference between what you're buying in the store and what you are actually eating. Go back to cooking the way you know that you should be cooking, and you will watch your health go up. If you don't know how, tune in to this channel right here, GTV. Eat like you mean it, drink like you mean it. I'm going to talk about drinking later. Eat like you mean it, drink like you mean it. Right now, we need to learn how to eat like we mean it, like our lives depend on it, because it does. Our economies depend on it, because it does. Those chefs out there that are doing great work, I applaud you. Those individuals out there that are growing their own, I applaud you, because it is necessary on all levels for us to be that person. We need to be growing our own, feeding our own in a way that is for us. No, I'm not going to talk too much more about this because we're coming up on Thanksgiving and we're coming up on Christmas and we're coming up on times when families are going to get together and they're going to, cook. Well, I want you to take a good hard look at what you're cooking. And remember that most of the stuff that you're cooking was cooked by your ancestors hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And that you need to get back to getting to what they cooked because they lived longer in harsher circumstances than you do with your big fancy house and your big fancy car and you still dying at age 50. Not going to go too deep into that. That's for a later date. But right now, I need you to understand that soul food is that what comes from the soul. It feeds the soul, which means those people that you're breaking the bread with, your family, your friends, that's the important part. That's what makes soul food soul food. Don't worry about the labels that people are putting on it. Because if they want to put a label on it, then they got to call it what it is. Afro-diasporic cooking. That's what that is. Soul food can be anything. Afro-diasporic cooking is what belongs to us. And if we keep giving it away, nobody's going to remember. Nobody's going to remember how to make it. Nobody's going to remember how to grow it. Nobody's going to remember what it is that we are supposed to have kept going. That's the reason why our ancestors didn't kill themselves when they had a chance. You think being a slave was easy? They did it because they knew the next generation and the generation after that, the generation after that was going to keep fighting. All of a sudden we think that we've made it and we go into TGI McFuddies or whatever else and we're not supporting our own and we're dying faster. Somebody gave us an okie doke and we went for it. This is Garland Raiford. This is GTV. I want you to eat like you mean it. I want you to drink like you mean it. I'm out.